And the next speaker is Barron Ernst. The floor is yours, Barron.
So, hi, I'm Barron. I come here working for Showmax, so I'm the Chief Product Officer for Showmax. I also am part of Naspers. Naspers is a fairly large tech investor. We do things kind of throughout the world. Notably here, you might have heard of things like OLX. We also are investors and owners of Avito and a bunch of other companies. And previous to that, I've worked at a number of companies. One Kings Lane, which was a large furniture company in the US that did flash sales, e-commerce, different things like that. And then also Intuit, which is a well-known kind of tax and small business software company in the US. So what this presentation is through kind of that career, a collection of things that I constantly see companies doing wrong in the world of retention. So in my role at Naspers, I have spent a lot of time working with our portfolio companies. A lot of these mistakes are things that I saw companies doing there. They're also mistakes that I've made. They're mistakes that other people I've talked to make. And I think that's the goal of this presentation, is to just give some tactical advice on things that you can fix right now that you're probably doing wrong. I don't expect you're doing all of them wrong, but there's probably a chance one or two of them is something that you're screwing up right now. One thing I like to say before I get started is, I hope we all agree retention is key. I show this graph, and I think this goes back to a lot of the points that Yara and David have already made and will be really relevant to the points later today. If your retention looks like this bottom graph, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is completely irrelevant. That basically means that you don't have product market fit, people don't like using your product, and if you're going to spend a bunch of time optimizing email channels or push notification channels or other channels, you're probably still going to fail. It's not going to make a difference. So I show this because these are the types of things that start to work as you start to see a flattening retention curve with your business. If you see that users come in and they use your product and they stick with your product, then it's a good time to start thinking about how do we now optimize the key touch points within our product? How do we increase the value of our product over time? But if it looks like this, then go and work with your product team on getting people to use the core pieces of your product, and don't spend a bunch of time worrying about all of the other tactical things I'm about to talk about. Just want to start there because that's key. Okay, I already kind of talked about this. I still see a lot of the same mistakes. People still keep doing things that seemingly would have been solved a while ago, but I'm going to talk through a bunch of them. So the way I've kind of divided this up is I start off with a few just very quick things that you can just fix now, probably things that you could go back and have an engineer implement really quickly. And then I go into some deeper, longer term things that are a little bit more complicated that need some actual thought. So the first few things are really simple. The first one is this. I still see a lot of people not doing a double opt-in for iOS notifications. I realize Android is like the much more prominent mobile product in the majority of markets in Eastern Europe. I've done a fair amount of work in Poland with Showmax. Regardless, if you're not doing a double opt-in on your iOS notifications, you should start doing one. What I mean by this is before you let Apple do its prompt, make sure you put your own in front of it and try to put it at key points during the user experience where a user is much more likely to want to opt in to get push notifications from you than to not want them. Remember, you only get one chance with Apple. If you screw it up, you screw it up and it's gone forever. One other thing that's key here that's actually become more relevant on Android is make sure that you're segmenting your notifications into notification channels. Don't only have one single notification channel so that when a user opts out, they opt out of all of your notifications. Make sure that you're being thoughtful about how you're implementing your products and thoughtful about how you're doing your mobile implementation. Again, those are things that literally you can go look up the documentation and fix it right now. Companies still get this wrong regularly. And then the other one that was really easy for us to solve is a lot of people complain to me regularly about my app has a bad rating. It has like a 3 rating or a 3.5 rating. How do I get this up? The right answer to that question is make a better product and get product market fit. There's a trick answer to that question, which is this. Create an app prompt that happens after key moments in your user experience. We were having this problem with Showmax, and to be clear, Showmax, we actually have the higher looking retention graph for our product. So we weren't worried about it, but we were still seeing a lot of 3.5 star reviews. We were averaging a 3 or a 3.5 on both of the app stores. So all we did was just create a prompt at a key part of the user experience where we knew a user had had a delightful experience in the product. We asked them to rate us, and then they gave us a good rating. Again, if you're not doing it, you're just going to be hurting your overall rating. And again, when people discover your app or your product, they're going to be less likely to engage with you. So those are a few quick things. This is what our rating looked like from when we implemented to after we implemented. This is actually this data is about a year old. So we've been consistently over 4 to 4.5 stars since we've done this with Showmax. And it's just a very simple thing that you can just go and do right away. So now I'm going to start to move into some of the things you can stop doing in your organization. There are 3 big buckets, and then I'm going to go into things that you should start doing as you start thinking about how to run A/B tests, how to do notifications, how to think about your retention strategy. So number 1, and this one I still see all the time, are people don't manage their email lists. They don't think about email beyond, I send a number of emails, a lot of people open them, I get a certain number of clicks, which lead to visits to the site. That's sort of what this dashboard is showing. It's like, hey, I got clicks, I got some unsubscribes, I delivered a bunch of emails. What often happens when you talk to companies is at some point, someone says, so we were sending X number of emails, and then the next day, we sent Y number of emails, and all of a sudden, we lost half of our base from clicking. What happened? What usually happened is something over here went haywire. An ISP blocked you, you got sent into a spam trap, you're not properly cleaning your lists for your emails. And the reality of all of this is, email is a really hard job. It's also a really important job for every company. It's still one of the most relevant communication channels out there, but it's not cut and dry. It's like anything, you need to actually spend the time, sanitizing your lists, making sure that you remove inactive users after 3 to 6 months. You need to make sure that you're sending emails that are directed and targeted well. You need to make sure that you're watching all of the various ISPs. Make sure that you're actually sending from different IP addresses for your marketing and your transactional emails. And these are things that all the time people still get wrong. And if you just fix them and you spend the effort on them, all of a sudden you have a leg up over your competitors, and you have the opportunity to really do well with email. So the takeaway is, if your dashboard looks like this, get it to look like that over time. Make sure you spend the effort to really think about it, especially if email is a critical channel for your business. Another thing that happens a lot is people really overcomplicate email design. Marketers, I think there's a lot of people in this crowd, people love emails that look like this. They think that when you're designing them, that's going to do really well. This is one we sent for a very long time at One Kings Lane because, oh my God, it has images and lots of buttons and places to click. One of the worst performing emails we sent, despite the fact that every marketer and every designer thought it was beautiful. The reason is, realistically, when you try to size this to a mobile template, when you try to make this work on a variety of ISPs, what you end up with is just a not well formatted email. It's hard for people to understand visually. Same kind of with this one over here on the left. The idea here is there's just a lot going on. It works really well on a desktop browser. It's not going to work nearly as well when you think through all of the different channels that users are reading email on. So, key things. 1, test your email designs across ISPs, across browsers, across devices. If you're not doing that, then you're probably not going to have good results. Number 2, try getting rid of your template entirely. I know that that's scary as a marketer, but a lot of times it actually works. I have a few links in my notes for this presentation where companies have tested really aggressively how much of their template they can get rid of. And for most users, they actually respond really well to just blank email templates. I'm not saying get rid of your branding. I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying consider that you might be overcomplicating things if you're doing a lot of design on email, when realistically what you just want to do is get a user to take a particular action and get them to drive to that action. And then this is the big one that still happens. And I used email as the example here, but this applies to pretty much any channel. Email, notifications, chatbots, anything. If your messages are generic, if they're newslettery, if they're the types of things that people were sending 5 to 10 years ago, then what you're going to see is what the trend looks like here. So what we see is that the open rate of emails has continued to go up over time, but the click-through rate has gone down. The reason for that is largely because people are still interested in seeing what's in the email, But if it doesn't have content that's relevant to them, if it isn't sent at a time that's relevant to them, then they're way less likely to engage with it. Remember, email volume continues to go up. People continue to get more email. Gmail continues to send things to different places in the promotion tab, and other providers are trying to do the same thing. So the key here is make sure that whatever message you're sending, whether it's email, whether it's push, you try to do some version of personalization and focus it on something that the user is actually going to care about versus making it generic. The biggest thing that we did at One Kings Lane was we started to personalize subject lines and sort order in our emails, and we had a massive increase of like 5 to 10% in our click-through rates and our open rates just from that. And it wasn't a huge undertaking to do full personalization. It was just simple bits of segmentation to segment certain types of users that were interested in certain types of products, and then really market those emails to them. And a lot of little things like that are the keys that you can start to do as you're thinking through how do you better target messages, how do you better target notifications to people. So that's a bunch of things that I think you can stop doing, that you can start to get rid of in your organization. Now I'm going to talk about things you can start doing. So the first one, after everything I've just talked about, might feel a little bit counterintuitive, which is I've sort of been saying, don't send too many emails, make sure you spend a lot of time sanitizing your list, be very careful with it. But then what a lot of people miss, and this comes from Feature, which is a really good growth marketing blog based out of Berlin. It's a bunch of guys who used to be the growth marketing team at SoundCloud, basically, is what a lot of people forget is usually within your first 7 days, if you bring in 100 users, you're lucky if you retain 20 to 30 of them. So what you actually have an opportunity with those users is to be more aggressive with them. What you see the majority of people doing in the first week with users with both drip emails, drip push notifications, onboarding messaging, is they tend to scale back. They tend to think, if I'm sending too many notifications to a customer, that actually is a way that I'm going to drive them away from my product. I agree with that, but at the same time, there's no reason you can't also test the alternative path. Very few products have retention greater than like 20 to 30% over the first 7 days. So if you know you're really likely to lose 70% of your users anyways, there's no reason you shouldn't cut off a small segment of those new users and get really aggressive with testing types of notifications to those users, types of emails to those users to really figure out what works early on in that cycle. This isn't to say that you should interfere with your current funnel, which you have proven and you know is going to work. But it's to say that take users who you think are likely to be disengaged and get more aggressive with them over time. Try different things with them. I think one of the things that gets missed here a little bit as well is an assumption that a lot of people make is I need to send less notifications. My users are getting too many. And I think at a high level that's true. But one of the things that people forget is that you have sort of a curve of how many notifications users like to get. This isn't true for every business, but it's true for a lot of businesses. So early on in the cycle, you're trying to get users onboarded. You're trying to get them really engaged with your product. You're trying to explain to them what they're doing, how they're going to engage, what's going to get them excited. At some point, they get to this point in the curve where they're newly engaged, and they probably don't want to be bothered. And I think what happens for a lot of companies is they get here and they stop. They say, okay, I've got them engaged. Now I'm going to go into some sort of a holding pattern with how I message my customers. I'm not going to do a whole lot of additional testing with them. I might send an occasional new email or new notification. But what a lot of people miss is that as they come up this curve and as you see people get more and more engaged with your product, so these are your power users, these are people who are really engaged, a lot of times these people actually have appetite for more messages or more notifications. And it's a delicate balance, right? You don't want to send them so many that they move back the curve, but at the same time, these users will give you indications that they're interested in new things. And so my point here is, don't only test here. Make sure you're testing with these folks. Make sure you're sending them highly relevant messages, and also see, can you start to include more messages to keep them coming back to your product on a regular basis? That's the kind of thing that has worked for a lot of companies. I know Pinterest has worked a lot on this stuff. You've seen a lot of different companies try this, and I think it's an opportunity a lot of companies don't think about. They don't think that I should send more notifications to people who really like me. And the fact is, they might want more notifications from you. They might be interested in hearing from you more often. So I include this because I see lots and lots of companies forget that these are different things. Also, that should be included here are things like chatbots and those sorts of things as well. A lot of companies approach email, push, in-app, chatbots, all the different channels as we just send all of the messages through all of the different channels. We don't actually think through how we should leverage each individual channel to send messages to people properly. And so the intent here is really to help you think about that. This is totally my own approach. Use what's right for your company. But the way that I think about email is email tends to be a passive activity. You can send an email, you hope that the user is engaging, but if the user sees the email 1 to 2 hours later, that's okay. Emails can have lots of CTAs. They can also have one CTA, but the point is that emails tend to be the type of a thing that you can contain more calls to action than some of these other types of notifications. They need to be targeted based on likely times of email engagement. So when we did One Kings Lane, what we would always think about is what are the most likely shopping times for our customers, and then how do we send emails to them at those times. So you should be thinking the same types of things with email. What's your product? In the case of my current company, we're a streaming video company. When do people watch videos? Well, they watch them Fridays in the evening, Saturdays during the day, and in the evening. So how do we make sure that we're priming them for that weekend viewing by sending emails at the right time? So we've tested a lot of things around, should we send on Thursdays? Should we send on Fridays? But the point is you want to get it to them at a time where it's relevant for them and where it's going to prime the behavior you want them to have. And then email, the other thing I'd say is the use cases are really broad. You can use them for everything from onboarding to newsletters to reminders to sales to engagement. But I think that's also in two different ways. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because they're so broad, but it's a bad thing because if you're sending too many of one type, then all of a sudden people start to assume that all of your emails are, let's say Groupon, are going to be deal newsletters or deal different things like that. So you have to think about what do you want your emails to represent when they come to a user's inbox. Do you want a user to be thinking, when I get the email from XYZ travel company, it's always going to be about deals? Do you want it to be a mix of different things? If it's Netflix, do you want it to be, I'm always getting notified about a new show? So think about what you want the channel to mean to your customers versus just sending all sorts of things across all of the different types of emails. So push, I put push as active/passive. I think they tend to be more active. You get them, you look at your phone, you then make a decision, do I want to engage or do I not want to engage? That's different than email in the sense that if people don't have push email notifications on their phone, or if people are checking email once an hour or once every 30 minutes, there's a better chance you're going to get an immediate action on a push notification. So I say the action time frame is shorter. It's 1 hour, but probably much sooner. I also think it's important that people remember a push notification generally contains one call to action. I've seen lots of companies attempt to push you to a page where you then decide something you're going to do, or make you try to put multiple different ideas into the push notification. If you're going to do push notifications to customers, make them clear, make them specific, make them relevant to the customer. So again, you target based on when the user is active on device, otherwise based on activity. I would say the use cases are broad, but again, they don't include such things as newsletters and different things like that. They tend to be more focused on, here is an action you can take right now. Here is content that is relevant for you. Come and see our product, come and use our app, and come and engage with us right now. And then the last one is in-app, and in-app is just very active. You assume a user is coming to your product. You want them to do something in the product right now. You want them to engage with a sale, engage with content, just do something immediately. A lot of the mistakes I've seen is people assume a push and an in-app notification need to be the same, when in fact they're very different. One is pulling you in, one is you're already here, now I want you to do something else. So I included a few quick examples. So email, engage a user for future event or content. I used streaming video because that's the space I work in. Push notifications, you can do something now, come back to the product. In-app notifications, here's something for you to engage with right away. Buy a ticket, there's a last minute deal, it's a limited time only type of offer. And I think it's key people start to think about them that way. Like I said, I don't have chatbots here, but chatbots are similar. Chatbots are for things like, you're on my website, you need support, let me help you out. So think about the context when you're thinking about all of the different notification and engagement channels you have with your customers. If you're not, it gets really easy for people on the marketing team to just sort of come up with, here's my overall strategy, now we're going to do it across all of the different channels. And all of a sudden you don't have a defined notification or communication strategy, you just have a high-level marketing strategy that you ticked all the boxes for. And that's not going to end up in good results for your retention or for your marketing team. Another kind of thing that I think gets left out is another start doing is it's pretty easy to simplify early personalization. I get the sense that there's probably a mix of startups and then maybe mid to later stage companies here. But at the early stage, what a lot of companies will tell you is, well, I don't have enough data about my customers to do deep machine learning, to get AI on these customers, to really understand what they're up to. And this, again, is a credit to the feature team, which I mentioned earlier in Berlin. They pointed out a really good thing, which I've also taken to heart. Stop thinking about personalization as something that requires a ton of data and a ton of learning. Think about it as something that, think about who your customers are and personalize based on that. So if you're a US-based company and all of your customers are in the Ukraine and you're sending out all of your notifications on US time, you're probably failing. Same with language. Think about where your users are. And if you have customers that are in multiple different language zones, you have a bunch of Spanish users and a bunch of Polish users, separate your notifications. Send the ones to your Polish users in Polish, the one to your Spanish users in Spanish. Make sure that you're doing those little elements that can enable you to have better engagement from customers. And then the last one, and this starts to get more data, is just simple actions and activity. I'm not recommending a deep kind of machine learning idea here. I'm saying things like a user added an item to a cart. A user started to watch a movie. A user started to check out on a particular flight, particular hotel, going on a sort of a trip. Those are all driving notifications that you can see, hey, this is a reason to re-engage with a user, to bring them back, and to start to personalize our retention experience for them, and to personalize our product for them as well. So the big last one that I see a lot of is companies don't run enough tests. I'm going to preface this by saying I agree with everything Yar and David said. You need to have a really well-structured way for coming up with hypotheses. David, I think, did a great job of talking that through. And Yar did a really good job of talking through measuring the potential impact of tests. But regardless of that, and this is just what I've seen, you still only expect 10 to 20% of your tests to be successful. Even with really well-formed hypotheses, even with really well-thought-out tests, a lot of times you end up with a very small percentage of your A/B tests being successful. And so what I like to recommend companies do, rather than getting excited about the one or the two A/B tests they're running, is build a machine and a mechanism that is capable of running a lot of tests and putting a lot of different points on the board and testing those things fairly cheaply. Because what I see a lot of times happening is a company runs 2 tests a month and there's less than one success. It's more like less than a half of a success. And you get into a situation where you've been really aggressively doing these 2 big A/B tests for 3 months, you've had no success, and all of a sudden you start to believe, hey, we're just not good at this A/B testing thing, it doesn't fit in our culture, it doesn't work for us. And the reality is what probably happened was a combination of 1, you weren't coming up with good hypotheses of what to test, and 2, you weren't making those tests cheap enough so that you could get quick data validation that they matter or that they don't matter. So that's why I included some of the different data points here. If you're running 20 tests a month, you should really only expect 2 to 4 of those tests to be successful. That's not saying that everyone has enough data points to run 20 tests a month or the infrastructure, but the idea is that if you want to get to more of a sweet spot, figure out how you could enable your team by making tests cheaper to run, by having a team that's dedicated to testing, building a growth team around this that can run more than 2, between 5 and 10 tests a month, because that should give you more opportunity to see 1 or 2 successful tests in a given month. And then when you start to see success, that starts to drive the team to focus in one of those key areas. So all of a sudden, the team goes from, we can't win, we're not successful, to they start to find things that work. Then they can start to double down on those things. They can start to say, okay, this is working, we should spend more time here, we should focus more on this, and you start to build that momentum, and all of a sudden the teams get really excited about wanting to continue doing this. So that is most of the points I had to talk about. The last big one that I include here before I'm done is I think it's really key to think about your multi-platform strategy as you're thinking about all of this. So one of the big things we've seen at Showmax is the more platforms we get users using our product on, the more engaged customers are. It's not totally surprising. We're a streaming video company, so if I can get you to download my product on a television, you're more engaged than if you only have it on your mobile app, because all of a sudden you can watch in HD, in 4K, on a widescreen. That's just a better engagement tool. But when I've looked at other products, it's the same general thing. If you have a web user or a desktop user, find ways to get them to download your mobile product. Find ways to engage them there. Use your different platforms as opportunities to cross-sell, because the more ways you can get people engaging with you, the more touch points you're going to have to engage with them in the future. So it's just the last point, and it's pretty empirically proven from what I've seen. If you're only focusing on one platform and you're not thinking about what is your cross-platform strategy, you're losing a lot of opportunities for retention over time. So that's the end. I think the big takeaway from all of this is what I said at the beginning. If you don't have good retention in your product, there's a very good chance that none of these little things will help at all. So start there first. And then as you start to build out your retention, your marketing, your email, your push strategy, just try not to fall into these traps. Or if you're in one of these traps, just think about how you can slowly get yourself out or how you can fix those different things. So that's what I've got. I am happy to take questions.
Perfect.
What time is it better to send emails?
That's a good. Well, it depends on. It totally depends. I mean, so One Kings Lane, we actually tested this hilariously a lot. The best time for us, this was a furniture e-commerce company, was 10 a.m. West Coast time, which was 1 p.m. Eastern time. To be clear, we were a US-only company. The reason that time worked was it would hit people's inboxes just as they were returning from lunch, or just as they had kind of finished. This was our hypothesis, but we did talk to people about it, or just as they had finished reading their work emails in the morning and they were ready for a quick break. We also sent another email at night around 6 p.m., and that would hit the West Coast at 6 p.m. and the East Coast at 9 p.m. And same general idea, right after work for people on the West Coast, and then as people were scanning their emails before going to bed or before laying down on the East Coast. And we tested moving it forward an hour, moving it forward 2 hours, moving it back, and it was just kind of an aggressive thing. I think it really depends, right? So Showmax, like I mentioned, we send emails closer to viewing time. Most of our views happen in the evening. It's a television streaming video product similar to Netflix. So if we send you an email in the morning at 9 a.m., you're going to forget about it by the evening. You're not going to remember the new content that we wanted you to watch. So we try to send it closer to that time when you're likely to engage with that content to kind of prime you to engage with it.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? I saw some hands. Yeah.
How do you balance between intuition and making data-driven decisions? Because there are companies that being over-analytical, and they end up just testing 41 shades of blue, just as Google did. So what's your advice there?
I mean, I think you can test that. The key is, I think what Yara outlined earlier is really key, right? Think about what the actual expected outcome of those tests are, right? So what is the upside of testing 41 shades of blue? If you're Google and you get a 0.1% increase in your click-through rate, then the machine that prints money in the basement, which prints a lot of money, goes up by 0.1%. So that's like a big deal. If you're you, or if you're a startup, and you increase your conversion metric by 0.1%, and your revenue is $1,000 and it's now $1,001, it makes no meaningful difference to your business. So it depends on the stage. If you're at an earlier stage of your company, it's more important to test probably bigger things, deeper hypotheses, and things that are going to lead to larger possibilities for growth than testing those really small optimizations. That doesn't mean you can't throw those tests in as well, but you shouldn't expect that they're going to have massive returns for your organization or for your business.
Okay. Yep.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. My name is Anna. And I'm wondering what level of retention minimum should the product achieve before going further? Thanks.
So it's a tough question. So if you couldn't hear, her question was, what level of retention should a product achieve before moving forward into more optimization? And it's actually a tough question because it depends quite a lot on the product. So I think the key is, if I were to show the slide again, which I won't, the key is that there is a flattening of the retention curve is the first most important thing. If the retention curve isn't flattening, if it's going to zero, then you have no product market fit. So that's really, really important. For certain products, like a subscription product, if you're flattening out at like 10 or 20%, you can build a nice recurring revenue business that you can easily stack revenue on top of. For other businesses, it might need to be a bit higher depending on the number of transactions or the number of purchases that occur. But the key is not necessarily the percentage as much as that the curve flattens, that you have some dedicated base of users who want to come back regularly and want to engage with you. Because if you don't have that, if everyone just eventually churns out, then you just have a leaky bucket. You're just going to keep spending money to bring more users in who are going to fall out at the bottom.